At the $150 price point, the Spectre Performance Cold Air Intake System is going to be the most affordable way to slap an aftermarket system onto your EcoBoost powered rig while keeping things extremely simple by design. Now, this no tune required intake is CARB certified, making it appealing to truck owners in all 50 states, and will be an extremely easy installation, getting a 1 out of 3 wrenches on the difficulty meter from me, but with more detail to come later on. So in my opinion, guys, the Spectre Cold Air is going to be for the 15 and newer EcoBoost owners out there who are more concerned with maybe saving a few bucks as opposed to going with some big, flashy, elaborate brand name intake that might give you a more fancy airbox design, maybe a little bit more in the way of piping, or maybe a different filter overall. Now, the Spectre, on the other hand, as you guys can see, is essentially as bare bones as it gets in the world of aftermarket intake systems. Yes, you are getting the smallest bit of polished aluminum intake tube, as you can see, very small of course, in addition to the high flow filter and the upper portion of the air box. Now, the entire kit is actually going to tap into the lower portion of your factory air box, and this is a design that I personally really like to see because it will still incorporate the factory cold air ducting, helping to pull that nice fresh cool air from the front of the truck, and it will seal to the underside of your hood thanks to that included weather stripping to help kind of block out any of that hot engine bay air. Now, even though you aren't receiving the intake tubes and the other stuff that you typically see in the aftermarket for the cold air intake category, you still are receiving the centerpiece of any cold air kit, the reusable high flow filter. Now, this guy can obviously be washed, re-oiled, and reused over time, saving you some money as opposed to buying a new paper element filter every year or so. You're also getting that airbox portion that we talked about a little bit earlier. So yes, even though you're not getting the full enchilada here, if you will, you still are going to be looking forward to some benefits. Now, one of those big benefits is definitely going to be hearing this thing in action a little bit more than you were before with the factory airbox in place. Even more so if you still have the stock exhaust on your truck, or maybe even a mild aftermarket catback exhaust. The increase in sound is going to be directly related to the open element style filter from the Spectre here, meaning it's not going to be in a sealed enclosure like your factory airbox. So because of this, a little bit more engine noise, maybe a little bit more turbo noise, things like that. And I think a lot of owners will actually look forward to hearing that, and that's something they typically point out in the customer reviews. However, if you're not one of those owners who likes hearing this extra noise, I'd probably recommend sticking with a sealed enclosure instead. You can find a few on the site from companies like Air Raid and AFE. And of course, another benefit truck owners look forward to when adding something like this is picking up a little bit of extra power. Listen guys, I'm gonna be pretty frank when discussing the topic because there are gonna be a lot of manufacturers out there that are gonna throw different horsepower and torque claims at you with their products, and typically they can be all over the place. I'm here to tell you that it's been my experience to see high single digit, low double digit gains when using an aftermarket intake without a tune. Again, that's just my experience. Maybe you guys have something different, but ultimately, yes, running a tune with an added intake will certainly boost those numbers, especially on these EcoBoost power plants where tunes really wake these things up. However, when just adding an intake by itself, look forward to some gains, sure, but don't expect to set the world on fire when it comes to one modification by itself. And at the end of the day, if you're a little apprehensive about this particular intake because of its low price point, I would highly encourage you guys to read up on some of the customer reviews, because the general feedback that I'm seeing with the Spectre is very positive overall. Reports of a little bit more power, a little bit better fuel economy, and of course that sound we talked about earlier are kind of the reoccurring theme I'm seeing with this thing. And for the mid-$100 price point, it will again be your most affordable option in the category, and by a pretty wide margin. But let's switch gears and quickly talk about the installation. And I'm happy to say if you have a basic set of hand tools laying around and the slightest bit of mechanical know-how, you should be able to get the Spectre installed onto your EcoBoost in about 30 minutes or so, and that's why I'm gonna give it a 1 out of 3 wrenches on the difficulty meter. Definitely an easy mod for anybody to tackle at home.
All right, so this install is very simple. All we have to do is remove the top portion of the factory air box, and to do that, we're gonna go ahead and loosen up the clamp holding it to our intake tube, and then we're gonna go ahead and hit these 2 little plastic retaining clips and just push those off with your thumb. All right, so now that our factory air box is out of our truck, we're gonna go ahead and set up our new intake. The nice part about this intake is we can actually fully assemble it outside of the vehicle before we install it. I'm gonna go ahead and start with the heat shield here. You're gonna use your provided hardware. You're gonna mate this plate with the rest of the provided air box. All right, now that our air box is set up with our hardware, we're gonna go ahead and tighten everything down. You're gonna go ahead and use a 5/16 inch socket and an Allen key. All right, so now our air box is all tightened down and set up. We're gonna go ahead and install our weather stripping. Now, this stuff might require some trimming, so go ahead and grab yourself a pair of snips. With your top weather stripping installed, it's time to do the two bottom pieces. You're gonna go ahead and flip your air box over, grab the two small weather strips and install them on either side. And again, you might have to trim these a little bit. Okay, so our air box is ready to go. The next step is installing the actual filter and air tube assembly. You're gonna take your filter and you're gonna tape this plastic adapter and fit it inside like so. Make sure it's nice and snug. Then you're gonna grab the largest band clamp that comes inside the kit. You're gonna slide it over the end of the air filter like this. All right, now our air filter is all assembled. We're gonna go ahead and slide it through the hole inside the air box, and then we can install our clamps, rubber coupler, and the actual intake tube itself. So go ahead and hold the filter itself and let the air box rest on the filter. Grab your rubber coupler, slide it over the intake tube portion on the air filter, and grab one of your clamps. Make sure the fastener is facing up, that way you can attack it with your tools once it's slid on. Make sure everything's nice and flush, and then you can go ahead and tighten that fastener down. All right, so we only have to do one more thing before we can actually install our new Spectre intake into our truck. We're gonna go ahead and install our nice polished intake tube onto the rubber coupler with our last clamp. So go ahead and throw this over like so. Again, make sure your fastener is facing up so you can tighten it down. Grab the skinny end of the tube and slide it inside nice and tight, and then go ahead and tighten this down. All right, now we're ready to install our new Spectre intake. You're gonna wanna go ahead and take all these little nibs on the airbox and line it up with the plastic housing here on the airbox. That way the entire airbox will sit nicely on the bottom portion of the factory airbox. All right, with your airbox in place, the last step is just sliding the factory tube over the polished portion of our new intake tube. And then once you have everything slid over each other and everything's nice and tight, go ahead and take your screwdriver and tighten down this band clamp. All right, now that our new Spectre intake is connected to our factory intake tube, the last step is securing the new heat shield to the bottom portion of the factory airbox. You're gonna go ahead and do so with the 2 original plastic clips that you removed during your uninstall. All right, so with that last clip done, that actually wraps up our review and install of the Spectre Performance Cooler Intake fitting your EcoBoost F-150. I'm Travis, thanks for watching, and for all things F-150, keep it right here at AmericanTrucks.com.